Good morning and welcome, fellow sovereigns. And have you ever started a diet, done really well, and then you fall off the wagon. You go back to how you were, or you started a fitness regime, and somehow you fall off the wagon just when things start going right, or you start taking supplements and feel much better each day, and you keep doing it, and then feeling really well, really good, and you stop, and then you wonder why. Or you start a relationship and it starts going really well, and then you sabotage it. Or you start a business and it starts going well and you sabotage it. Why do we do that? So I'm going to tell you a true story about a friend of mine, or two friends of mine in Tauranga. It was 20 something years ago. So Marie is a very fluffy person, let's say. She's a little bit overweight. She's very cuddly, very loving. Just there's not an unkind cell in her body. She's just very loving and giving. And so she'd been on her own. She had two daughters that she was bringing up on her own, been doing that for, I don't know, 20 years. And she was quite keen to have a relationship. And then she met Kevin. And they were just perfect together. They just fitted. It's hard to say, to explain that, but they just fitted. They were just supportive and loving and accepting, and just everything was perfect. He eventually moved into her place, into her house, and everything was going swimmingly for about 6 months. And then he was diagnosed with cancer. Now, it doesn't that happen? You fall in love with this perfect soulmate, and then how? Anyway, that happened. So he got worse and worse, and they tried everything, and eventually he had to go into hospital because she couldn't look after him. He had too many minute by minute needs, let's say. And so she would go and visit him in hospital every day, probably twice a day. And they would have loving conversations, and they would just be there for each other. And she was supportive, and he was incredibly grateful. Then one day she went into the hospital and he wasn't there. And it was most unusual. He couldn't get out himself. He couldn't even walk properly. He could sort of, he had two, what are they called? Things, walking sticky thingies, but he needed help. So somebody had to have done it, helped him. So she asked the nurses, and they said that a certain person had been in to pick him up, and they'd gone out in her car. And Marie was so upset because that was his ex girlfriend. Now, Kevin had grown up with an abusive mother, a physically and verbally abusive mother, and a father who would not stand up for his son. So that's what Kevin knew as a boy: abuse from a woman and no support from a man. So what did he do? His wife that he married, obviously, one marries one's wife, um, was pretty much like his mother. She abused the heck out of him. He couldn't do a single thing right. Couldn't do anything right. And so he went from an abusive mother to an abusive wife. And that lasted as long as it lasted. And then they divorced. And Kevin was bereft. And so he found this girlfriend. And she was no different. She looked different. She was a different body, but a similar. She abused him. She abused the heck out of him, and she was almost worse. She was probably worse with the verbal and the putting down than his mother and his wife had been. It's like the scale. He was getting more and more abuse each time he went into a relationship with a woman. And so eventually he thought, he realized when he started at this, he got to the lowest point, basically, as we sometimes do, and that's what triggered him to start doing his own internal reflection, internal work. And he realized that the world did not send these three women to him. He attracted them. He realized that he had his own need of abuse, if you like. Sounds bizarre, but that's what he came to. And so in that self-inquiry, he realized he could change his mindset, that he could undo the need to be abused. And so he eventually allowed, if you like, himself to stand in the place of power. And so he ended the relationship with that abusive woman, and he decided he was not going to have another relationship with anyone unless it was absolutely supportive and loving and all of the things that Marie was. And so eventually they got together. And so when she'd gone to the hospital, she found out that he'd gone out with his previous girlfriend, the one he had said to Marie, I never want to see her again. She's so abusive. She's just, he felt terrible when she was around, and all she did was just put him down, and it was just, yeah, he didn't want her in his life ever. Anyway, she turned up at the hospital, and it was very loving and yeah, nice, and she said, "Would you like me to take you for a drive in the car?" Yes, it'd be nice to get out. And so the hospital people said, "Okay, if you're happy," um, and off they went. But Marie was so upset because she thought that Kevin had decided to go back to his old girlfriend. And she was she was really upset and puzzled. So we had quite a lot of chat about it. And I explained to her the possibility that he needed to go back to his uncomfortable comfort zone. And that confused her. And I explained to her that the possibility was being abused was his comfort zone. It was his home. It was what he was used to. It was his go-to place because that's what he had known for all of his life up till the time that he and Marie were together, about 6 months. And so sometimes we just need to slip back into that, what's a comfort zone? And then she realized that, yes, possibly, yeah, when we're making any progress, it's not always on a straight line. It's and the idea is that at least each up is higher than the previous up. Each down is higher than the previous down. So when we're making progress, it's often an up and down, but hopefully it's an up and down and up and down and up and down that's going up overall. So we slip back into these. And so in the same way, if you're say 12 stone and you really want to be 10 stone, you think you're overweight. I have no idea what 10 stone is in grams and what are kilos, whatever. And so you start losing weight. You get from 12 stone down to 11 and a half to 11 to 10 and a half, and you nearly get back to where you want to be. And then you slip back to 12 because that's where you've been for a long time, perhaps. That's your uncomfortable comfort zone. And sometimes we need to slip back into that. We don't need to, but it's just what we do because it's our home, it's our comfort, it's our accustomed place. And so that's often what happens. It's what happened. And so Kevin came back with the girlfriend, and the girlfriend went off, and Kevin was absolutely thrilled to see Marie. He hadn't given up on Marie and gone back to the girlfriend. And so sometimes when we're starting out a new program, and I think I've done all of them. I've slipped back on diets. I've slipped back on fitness programs. I've slipped back on relationships. I've slipped back on businesses. I've slipped back on probably every single one of those things, which is probably why I had a wee bit of insight for Marie. I am the expert of slipping back. And in the olden days, back when men were men and so were women, I would beat myself up for going back there. And then I realized, well, it took some time to realize this, but it's what we do. And it's okay if we, one, realize it, and two, if we don't beat ourselves up about it. It's a very normal thing to do. And if we can just accept that we are humans, and that if we have come from an accustomed place, for Kevin it was being abused, and he didn't like it, but it was what was home in a sense. And if I'm, say, I'm way overweight, if I'm 12 stone, and I don't like being 12 stone, and I want to be 10 stone, but I've been 12 stone for so long, it's a comfort place. It's an uncomfortable comfort zone. And so our mission is simply just to realize that it's okay, that we slip back. And as I talked about yesterday, it's not about seeing ourselves. It's not judging. I am 12 stone. Not I'm overweight, I'm bad, I'm terrible, I am simply 12 stone without judgment. And so when we slip back into the old rut, I often say that a rut is simply the grave of the ends kicked out, but it's still a grave because it's somewhere we don't want to be, and it's somewhere where we die if we stay there. But we can slip back into the rut, and then we can get out of it again. But it's much easier to get out if we don't beat ourselves up. Oh, you're useless, you're stupid, you're going, oh, you can't you can't maintain whatever. If we simply accept we've gone back into where we don't want to be, our old comfortable, uncomfortable comfort zone, and then we start again, and we start again, and we start again, and we start again, and it's each low is higher than the previous low, and each high is higher than the previous high, and it's often the way of our progress. So, what do I wish you? I wish you a gentle slide into your uncomfortable comfort zone, a gentleness with yourself while you're there, and a gentle rising afterwards. And bless you and all who sail in her. Now, where's the button? Oh, there.